Hello and welcome. Today is all about engineering culture. Topic for today is trunk-based development. Adrian, hello. Are you excited?
Hello, thank you for having me again.
Oh, I think we nailed something with the topics here, especially with our pairing. Like we seem to mix and mesh well together, and the community is always super excited to see us talk about engineering culture. Definitely, I have to shout out a few names. Balazs, especially, I think we have to mention as the, let's say, the person who suggested us to give this topic more focus, specifically trunk-based development. There's a lot of live chat participation on the stream 2 weeks ago when you and I were together, before you went on vacation. Um, so trunk-based development was a topic that I picked. I just had it on the list, and then Balazs just incentivized me to put it at the top of the list. Plus, we also have the new Dora DevOps report that came out now-ish, but it caught fire on, let's say, on LinkedIn in the influencer community about the correlation to burnout. And Brian just linked the Google group discussion that I'm not a member of, so I didn't see it yet. But thank you, Brian. Thank you for being with us. There will be definitely questions about that. Agenda for today is mostly TBD in the context of small businesses and just being pragmatic and working with the strengths of your teams, and how to approach TBD in a simple way. Should you approach it? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Are we missing something? And how it can lead to continuous delivery and sort of have a minimal step ready there for as a walking skeleton to adopt continuous delivery in some form. What are your thoughts, Adrian?
My thoughts are so we had a lot of discussions in the last 2 weeks about that topic. Even if we wanted to talk basically about pull requests and code reviews, but somehow trunk-based development became the third thing in that, and more and more it transitioned into that topic. It wasn't starting with the idea of having a stream today, so people are really thinking about those kind of methods, how they actually can develop and deliver software. And the interesting part is that the voices for trunk-based development are quite loud and loud. And in my opinion, they are great because I really like that. So in the last, let's say, 20 years of my duty, majority of the time, I was avoid to branch. So at all. So I basically I'm pro that. But I asked a lot of questions in the last days and had some polls, and I wrote an article now about the topic I mentioned before. And there was a question about basically TBD. And it's interesting to say that most people don't use it, and most people prefer still to not to have some let's say security layers in between, some emotional branches,
manual security layers.
Yeah, and we had a lot of descriptions about that, and discussions about that, and people mentioned that you should not do that. And I think this is quite an exciting and interesting topic, because basically the community is very colorful about that. And this is what I really like about that. So in my opinion, trunk-based development is something we like to a point where we should try to go to, try to find our way to. But yet I understand a lot of companies why they don't do it at the moment. But there are a lot of people like they don't do it at the moment, but they try to get there on some point. So we have those three buckets of people, of developers, of tech leads. And I think this will be a great session today about that.
Absolutely. So we also got a lot of comments last time from you guys in chat. Yes, hello. Let us know you're here. If you have some questions already, let us know. We will respond to as many comments and live conversations we can that are coming up in chat. Balazs, you're already here. Brian, hello. Wait, Balazs had a question. Mark Batti, Fraction Secret, would be great to know how they link those two things together. What concretely was the main factor? Okay, so that's addressing the Dora report, I believe. We will definitely address that. If you're here with us, let us know. If you have any questions, say hello. If you want to mingle with each other and ask each other questions, because Brian is in chat, and I think Andrea will join us, and Balazs is still here. So if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, what's your experience? Adrian just mentioned a lot of our community want to go TBD but are not actively practicing TBD and are happy. I saw your article. Not only are they not practicing TBD, but they are happy with what they are practicing instead, which is pull requests, code reviews, and then merging after the review. Now, TBD doesn't mean that you can't have that, but that's a discussion for the next section. We got a lot of comments that people really like our text, that the experience that we get just from hands-on, like we're not detached from real engineering. So to give maybe our viewers some context, what is your domain here? You focus on small medium businesses. What is your real connection to TBD?
So I'm basically a hands-on CTO, if you like that. So I don't do that much of hands-on anymore, so mostly strategic stuff. So which is the reason why I'm thinking about so much about those things, how we can improve the organization, the culture of working together with the developers, together with the other stakeholders or clients. So this is what I'm at the moment, but still I'm doing quite a lot of hands-on stuff, especially in my free time. So this is basically my hobby as well. This is why I call myself still a hands-on CTO, because I'm developing still. I'm doing things most of the times. I lay out, let's say, new prototypes, new ways of work. I'm filling out like platform as a service solutions and bring them then to the team so they can be implemented by the real, let's say, organizational team. But I think the interesting part is, let's say, in the last years, so I would say 15 to 20 years, most of the time, let's say the first years we basically worked without any form of version control. That's how I grew up. This was just an FTP server,
and I hated it.
Exactly.
Or SVN was my
and exactly. Then SVN or Subversion came out, and we were just using it. So we were not thinking about too much about branching. So I was afraid of branching. When I first started with it, I basically wasn't able to understand branching at all. So it was too complicated. And when we tried it, it failed at some point. So we stopped that quite early. And without knowing the terminology of trunk-based development back then, I don't even know if it was existing back then, but we were practicing something like that. So we always were basically pulling, pushing, or it was committing, and I don't know, it was a different terminology there. But we were very close to the trunk. And it always felt good. And then came the transition to Git. Everyone was using Git. And then suddenly people talked about branching and Git flow and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then we said, okay, we need to enhance and all this kind of stuff. We need to adopt that. The problem was it wasn't a good idea to try to make an adoption there.
I think we all tried Git flow instead of got promised TBD, but then what really got was the opposite.
And we had many dead branches, and it was like we were disciplined on some point, but it was hard to manage all this, and you had everywhere this dead code, dead features, outdated whatsoever, and
constant remerges, constant repeating the same conflict resolutions across different ages.
And we were asking, haven't you implemented this? No one knows in which branch was what, and it was a little bit awkward, and we had so many merge conflicts and all this kind of stuff. So we basically ditched that again and went back to, come on, let's just use one branch with every developer, right? Pull and push directly to that, and that led us to the idea of having very small tickets. So our changes were very small. So that made it easy. So we had just some lines of code and maybe, let's say, some files, and that's it. And actually, that's quite a good thing now. So we feel very well with that approach. We have our tests in place. Everyone knows about this. It became culture. Let's say it became culture and habit for us. And the last years, then, when this terminology was coming out, people were really people were really, let's say, using those new terminologies, or for me it was new, and then we adopted it and we found out, okay, that actually fits very well. We resonate with that, and we were very happy about that. So and we don't want to go back from this kind of solution, you know.
Brian commented the same thing. Like he said, I almost transitioned our area to GitFlow, but Gary Gruber explained why I was wrong right before I did that. I always buy Gary over here.
Yeah,
So,
that's
we also have a lot of. We also have a few comments. So sorry for interrupting. I just want to give recognition to those that have answered. So Ricardo is with us here. Said we are a team doing game dev. I don't have a lot of experience with game dev, so that's super exciting to see engineering practices in game dev. Like game dev and ML, like hardcore ML, those engineering practices I know can be very lacking compared to our like web development bubble. So it's great to hear even from specialized industries how they're doing stuff. So he's saying they're doing game dev using TBD full. It's great. Way higher production and no burnout at all in our case, I think.
Some years ago, I heard that in game development, because of the large assets, they still use Subversion because of the delta merge stuff. It was like big binary files would be better there. So probably because Subversion isn't very great about branching at all. So I can maybe imagine that this is the reason why they stay with trunk-based development. But it's
Christian
a guess.
Christian mentioned fast-forward approach, asynchronous code reviews, and branch to the trunk at least once a day. And Brian said, TBD, you can use short-lived branches. That's it. Show's over. Brian said you can use branches. We can all go home. No, I like this easy approach of where would you want to go next? Because you mentioned you tried GitFlow, you wanted TBD, you didn't use version control, and you started using version control, and then that was amazing. And then when I started using SVN, my problem was, okay, I loved SVN, I loved having history, but I hate dealing with conflicts. And in order to not deal with conflicts anymore, I branched. And that helped me not deal with branch while I was working, but it caused a bigger conflict when I was done. And then I realized that I was not done. I was just done with my work, but now I had to still I didn't get around. I thought I solved the merging problem, but I didn't, because I still had to resolve the conflict. But now it was much harder to resolve. And if there was any problems, I now didn't know, should I resolve the conflict on my branch and then try again, or merge it conflicted and then try to resolve it? And usually the conflict was in such a format that you couldn't make it compile if you merged it. And I think that's one of the core problems that we have that TBD solves, is that when you have a conflict, you can still merge it because you might have it feature flagged, and then you can resolve the conflict, like resolve the issue on the mainline. Especially if your testing suite detects it and is green, and then later on you notice that we were lacking a test, like we actually missed the signal, and then we fixed it later. Because we thought that GitFlow would give us that superpower, that GitFlow will help us. If we're disciplined with GitFlow, we will never have merge conflicts. We'll never have to do that. And every time, all commits just go into one direction. And that didn't happen. And then everybody I saw and talked to and worked with who tried GitFlow had exactly the same sort of disappointment with it. Now, maybe that's an adoption problem. But if something as simple as GitFlow requires a lot of knowledge to adopt, then it's not a good process. And I think that's one of our main approaches. And Brian linked minimum CD, so that's minimum continuous delivery. I think we're all signatories here. Did you sign it, Adrian?
Not yet, but I will. So because I wanted to do that now in the next article until next week, where we grab those all up together. And I just saw that you actually can do that. I wasn't aware of that before. So
yes, you can.
And
the website is also done with continuous delivery. So, and they have a review, and there is a review process, but it is continuous. The moment you commit it, it's done. So let's try to get a definition for this, because I think the main problem is, Angel responded, in game dev, almost no organization does TBD, sadly. Really good ones do. And that's interesting. I think that captures Brian Finster's anecdotes and his use cases as well. It's like all the good teams do this, but most companies don't. And that has been my experience as well with TBD and continuous delivery. It's like most good companies do it, but it's like the good companies do it, the elite performers do it, but most companies don't. Now, most companies are not elite performers, but is that a good goal to strive for, or is that a red herring? That's what we want to discuss today. So
yeah. So what
how do you
comes
want
to
to
my
approach
mind is what is a good team. So it's just several. There were several posts in this week alone about that topic, that you need to have this A players, though. You need to be a
Oh,
good
like
programmer.
my team is not experienced enough.
Yeah, but is it
Continuous
the
delivery
problem?
is only for experts. So my team is not expert, so we're not going to do continuous delivery.
I
I
think
hate that argument.
I think it's not about that you maybe, let's say, some say that you only need to have seasoned, experienced seniors to practice that. In my opinion, it's not the case. So first of all, you need to have some form of motivation to do that. So it's always the same. You need to motivation to change things. And the next thing is that you actually need to have, let's say, a culture in place, which is a result of this motivation. So you need to foster and cultivate this motivation, those mindsets that you want to work this way, because it's not like, okay, let's just push to a single branch and see what happens. It's about tests. You mentioned, pipeline needs to be green. How do you make sure that this green indicates okay and not just okay? You know what I mean? There's a big difference.
Do I trust the green?
Exactly.
Do I trust? Am I confident that green means green?
Yeah,
That's the
and
most
then
important
there are
part.
teams out there where developers not even have access to the CI/CD pipeline to see that.
Yeah,
So,
because they're expensive and they're in the hands of the QA team, and nobody else has access to that, and then
yeah,
they can't trigger it by themselves.
and this is a little bit the idea of DevOps as well, where the developer is going more into the direction of
Shift
the delivery
left and
process
then
as well.
put
Right.
it more into the development team. Yeah.
Exactly, so that you can actually put into or define in your definition of done for a change that you actually, have a green pipeline as a developer, and then because you are a mature person, you are responsible, and you take ownership, and this is very important. Then you can say, okay, my change is basically through. It wasn't breaking anything, and it wasn't changing features which were already there or something like that in a way it wasn't supposed to do that. And I think this is very important to understand. So it's not about being elite, it is about implementing the right culture. So we do that without being the senior only elite team. So we have juniors working with that, and it's absolutely no problem to do that whatsoever. It's not, and this is what I can give to everyone. It's not about being very good. You need to have the mindset and start to develop your skills and understand what is trunk-based development, what is the idea, what is CI, what is CD, and why we do that, how is that all bound together. And why do you do things? You need to understand before you execute.
That also ties into my experience. So, I saw the results of your survey, the article that's going to go live in 40 minutes. You'll be posting it on stream, right? The one you just scheduled. The article.
The article is scheduled by end of this session.
End of the session. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Because one of those findings is that most teams don't do TBD, and they're happy with what they're doing, which is usually code reviews and merging after branching, and then merging after code reviews, whether that's pull requests or not. But there's review involved, manual review involved, and manual merging involved. So my experience has been always, I'm coaching teams, and especially I'm coaching leaders, but then I'm working with the leader from top, bottom, strategy and business, and with their team specifically, with their immediate reports. Sometimes that's engineers, sometimes that's managers if I'm working with a VPE. And my experience has been the same. They don't practice. They want to go continuous integration, or maybe continuous delivery. They're not doing it. They're overwhelmed. And I am basically coaching them. It's like, okay, well, what is the biggest constraint here? And my context is always, well, you're not doing TBD, but you're showing some talent, let's say, that makes TBD easy to adopt, and then there are a few problems. And I always say I like to use TBD. Brian also mentioned this just now. People never believe it until they do it, and then they don't want to go back. But the goal is continuous delivery, not TBD. And I really like this take, because I always say, TBD is not the goal. TBD is just a KPI, or maybe an OKR. I think KPI would be better to describe, can we do CD now? How far away from continuous delivery are we? And I always say, the things that prevent you from doing TBD and specifically from adopting continuous delivery, are those things that hinder your productivity as a team. And not just productivity from an efficiency standpoint, but like cohesion to actually adopting business goals, to providing value, not just producing features, right? Because we can comment about this as much as we want, but the DORA metrics are not a sort of all-inclusive productivity measure. The DORA metrics only measure after the commit has been done, and TBD is the other side, right? Like TBD measures everything that happens up until that point. And what the DORA metrics will tell you is, okay, well, you're done. Like you've stopped, what's the word? You stopped implementing the feature, or you sort of made steps towards connecting implementation with the end customer. And then the DORA metrics measure what that process looks like. Is that immediate? Is that a week? Is that a day? Is that an hour? What are the problems? What are the possible areas where we can improve? But my experience has been always that if somebody tells me, oh, we can't do continuous integration because X, that is always a very good signal to go work on X. Right? Maybe they say, I can't do TBD because I don't trust my developers. Okay, well, what prevents us from building trust? Right? Because a very aggressive 3 reviewers needs to confirm kind of culture will continue fostering a zero trust environment, which is great if you're in a zero trust environment. But if these are people in your company who have signed NDAs and who are on payroll and who are on synchronous or sort of semi-asynchronous in this time zone work relationship, and you trust them with things like the security and the private data of your customers, like zero trust environments and zero trust deployment workflows don't belong into such an environment. They do belong into some environments, especially when there's this sort of internal zero trust policies going on, as you would have with banks and financial institutions, so that you would have sort of a regimented layer of access. But I don't think, and then that would be a problem if you don't have continuous delivery because it was managed by a human, but then continuous delivery is actually what helps you accelerate in such an environment because it's automated and no one person needs to be locked out from that system. So on that topic, I like to start out the topic of minimal, like TBD. I like to just simplify it and say, because there's a lot of confusion. What is trunk? Is trunk master? Is trunk develop? Those people who are sort of closer to Git flow than they are to TBD. Am I using one branch, or like my branch is called main, not master, not trunk? Like, is that still trunk based? Is it master based? Is it main based? So just to make something clear, to make things a little bit easier, and even to just oversimplify, just even beyond what's in the minimum CD website. For me, trunk-based development is about how far away, like the distance your commit is from mainline. If I commit something, if that commit has distance of 0 when I commit it, and then it can be deployed, that is TBD. If I and to be specific, the amount of distance, meaning how many manual commits a human needs to do to get it deployed. So if it's on my branch, and then I have to manually review it, and manually merge it, and then manually create a release tag, that would be a distance of 3, let's say. Right? Like I think that's the default of Git flow. So there I would say, okay, you're so far away from trunk, or you're sort of a live branch, that it's so hard to integrate that for every commit, if you decided to deploy every commit would need 2 more or 3 more commits. And that's what we're trying to do, because that's artificial work. That is synthetic work that is unnecessary. And it is made unnecessary by integrating immediately as you commit. And really the trade-off that we get by introducing this distance from trunk is saying, I don't want to be interrupted right now, and I prefer a larger interruption tomorrow. And if that is the default of the company, then everybody is constantly having to deal with this large interruption as they want to merge. Because the problem isn't so much merging. We keep talking about this. One of the biggest problems with non-trunk based development is that usually branches get started on a non-green branch. Usually branches get started, and then the branch that is on master might already have a problem. And then when you branch out, you might say, oh yeah, but I know that those tests were failing, so I didn't address them, and I assume I didn't make them worse. And I had a test for my stuff passes and that stuff didn't, so I'm assuming this is fine. And then that is the default that I see in most teams, is that they don't take that seriously. And the solution to that is always, just take the mainline seriously. If the mainline tests are not passing, or if you don't trust them, we don't create a branch. Not even short-lived ones. We fix that first.
Yeah.
Because whatever that is now on production, so we can't make it worse than that. So there's no need to isolate. Anybody who wants to isolate is creating that. I will deal with that commit. I will deal with that large conflict later. And usually that is in terms of capital efficiency, of how much time you're going to invest into a project. That is always like a hidden unknown at the end, and just before deployment. And it's unnecessary. And a lot of teams think that's necessary. So let's.
I think.
Let's check how. If we triggered Brian. Let's see. Not yet. Paul Hammond says, I prefer large interruption tomorrow. I like that. It's a good way of putting it, I think. Okay. You wanted to comment on something?
Yes. You mentioned that it's about to be able to deploy to every time. And this is important to mention. So because many people in the last weeks, I heard that they mismatched that with continuous deployment on some point. So you basically push something and it's go out to the client. So basically the idea of continuously, push it out directly to the client and there's nothing in between and it's a horror show. So it's actually more about, the idea is more about being in a state of being deployable. And I think this is something people need to really understand, that the whole mindset of the team needs to be, when I push something into, merge something into our trunk, then I must make sure that everything is functioning, green and deployable. So it should not be the problem. So in my mindset, I need to be mature and say, okay, when I do that now, everything is fine. I can go home, nothing will happen. So, and you mentioned feature flags, and this is another thing I want to comment, is that it's important to prepare your code. So when you work in branches, you isolate your work away from the main branch, in another branch. And this is not you do that there.
Band-aid over the symptoms. You still have to do it. You're just pulling it up. You're just discounting the future, thinking that it'll be easier to do in the future once the feature is stable.
Yeah, but when you use trunk-based development, then you need to basically do it differently. You need to make sure that the code you do, even if a feature is not finished or it's just a part of a feature, it's still not breaking things which are already there. And it fits quality and fits requirements and all this kind of stuff. So it's a different set of techniques you need to learn in order to get this done right.
Let's be practical. I coach a lot of teams. You said you're a hands-on CTO. You get a new team. Let's say I work with a new team, or you hire a new team in, and you see that they're not practicing TBD. Is that a problem? Would you intervene? How would you support them? Is there a better alternative? Like, is there ever a good reason to not do TBD? What would you do? Like, you saw that your team is not practicing TBD. Like, how big of an issue is that for you?
So I worked with teams in larger German companies together, and they had, let's say, the requirement from top level that they need to do this for audits, and they need to sign the audits, and this will go into another process where they review this process once a while in a year. So I understand there's no question about, you don't need to try to get to the point there. This is especially interesting, in my opinion, for smaller teams, smaller companies, and startups. Of course, you can do that in larger companies as well, but this is just my experience. Is basically the go-to thing. And I would try to get them to do, let's say, TBD, or even get very close to it. So, because I write about tech culture, engineering culture, mindset, and all this kind of stuff, learning skills, continuous learning. And when you practice those things, you will always come to the point that TBD is better than branching. you know.
Mhm.
And this is actually my personal point of view, so this is no law, so nothing, it's just what I think about that. And every time I see a process where this isn't the case, I see second backlogs, stacking up issues, stacking merge conflicts, the real
Inventory of
burnout.
unmerged
Exactly.
features that might be stale or maybe
Yeah.
unmergeable because they're too old.
And we don't have those problems in our daily work, you know. It is like we have other problems, of course, that it's not like you don't have problems anymore, you know.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a little bit too much, you're switching projects or something like that. It can happen as well, but the tendency that you have outdated code, you know, missing features, there's somehow you're disappearing features because someone rebased wrongly or something like
Yeah.
that. You don't have that anymore. And this is very important because yes, you said hands-on CTO, but I'm most, you know, primarily a strategic person. And what I
Mhm.
want to have is qualities like sustainability, you know, like quality in general, you know, keeping your quality. All this is somewhat important for the business. So we're not only talking about developer ideas, you know, what the developer needs. We're talking about business needs here as well. So, and this is very important that you have a workflow which continuously adds value in a sustainable way, you know, for your business, for your clients.
Yeah.
And so I cannot do differently than saying, okay, if we have the opportunity here to change something, I will foster this and try to cultivate a culture around this. Of course, I will.
Brian just commented, Brian just commented that the merge conflicts are the resolution for it is avoidable. And I like that you also use this terminology called finished, right? So when the work is finished, because I always say the work doesn't have to be finished. What do I work with teams? So I work with teams, but they tell me, Dennis, we have all this work. There's all these branches waiting. I now have deteriorated to the state where I need to create tickets for people to force them to go review old branches because everybody's just creating new branches and working on new things, and then they're done, and then they're unmerged and undeployed. And then they ask me, usually early on when we're still building the relationship, when they don't really know how extreme I can be in my in my focus, they ask me, Dennis, how can I review faster? How should I incentivize code reviews and pull requests? And then I usually go all the way to the end. It's like, okay, well, how can we not have them? Code reviews and pull requests are extra work, no? So how can we not have this extra work? Right? Because while somebody is reviewing, that implies somebody else is working on something else on some other branch. So whoever branches first will be lucky, and whoever branches second, even though it's reviewed, not knowing that then the second person will merge, that merge can then cause a conflict in the second branch that was already reviewed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
however we put it, however we optimize it, there's always this synthetic sort of extra work going on. So I said, how can we keep the amount of open PRs to 0? Even if that means not opening any. And they're like, is that safe? But what about code review? And I always suggest, the best way to review code is to pair it together.
Mm-hmm.
Just write it together. If 2 people write it, then you don't need to review it because it's reviewed while it's being written. There's no extra work, right? And we talked about this 2 weeks ago on this idea of monotasking.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this idea that if you need to work alone on something, that's fine. I coach a team that there's a developer on that team that says, sometimes I just like to work alone. I just like to focus and be with my thoughts. And I respect that. Sometimes I am working on a task like that as well, and maybe sometimes I'm just writing an article and just want to be left alone. That's fine. But then if I want that article reviewed, I'm thinking, would it have been helpful to just write it with someone? And usually the answer is yes. Actually, it would have been helpful to just have somebody with me here and actually write it with them. But then after it's done, if I put it off for review, that's usually asynchronous. And then, okay, well, what should I do now? So my suggestion is, and this is also on the Minimum CD website, my suggestion is, well, if nobody can review it right now live with you while you're coding, at least schedule a meeting and review it together with them. Call them up and review it immediately now, asynchronously. Like the last ditch effort is doing asynchronous pull requests. And then usually people ask me, okay, how do I optimize that? And they always say, oh, I don't want interruptions. And I always tell them to not to not avoid interruptions. Just make interruptions not require context switching, because that's what they want to avoid. They don't want to avoid the interruption. Person A working on task A, person B working on task B. If they interrupt each other, it will be a context switch. If both of them are working together on task A, then the interruption does not require a context switch. And that's what you want to maximize. And then both of them go and work on task B. And if the team is 13 developers or 20 developers, then you just have multiple squads of this. And that's doable. But with TBD, what really, really gets under my skin is when people tell me, Dennis, but we don't want to deploy every commit. We don't want to deploy every commit. We're fine with just putting it into a branch, letting it marinate for a bit, and then we release when we release. And Brian has a great take on this, because I see Brian and Andrea always comment on this exact thing on LinkedIn. To paraphrase them, it's, you don't care most of the time, but when there's an emergency, you will really care.
Mm-hmm.
And then your hands will be tied. Then you won't be able to respond faster. So what's the key ingredient here? I mentioned the distance from trunk. How many synthetic commits are there? How many synthetic merges, reviews are there between my work and actual work? Because you mentioned functioning. When it functions, when it works, when it's finished, then we merge. I think TBD is this idea that we take trunk seriously. Like, trunk will have unfinished work, but at least it's mergeable. And then we improve on it, we iterate on it in a safe way, in a responsible, professional way on trunk.
Mm-hmm.
Because this idea that it will be safe and professional in isolation, that's the problem. As long as it's in isolation, it is not integrated. So you don't know what the real problems are. Right? So
we just focus a little bit on the idea of why do you actually need to have someone reviewing your code now? So this is something. This is what is the incentive? What is the benefit from this? So, of course, we have this reviews, this idea of 50 files changed, hundreds lines of code, and someone needs to sign this. So this is a bad idea. The more code it is, the more likely is that someone just force pushes it because it's not reviewable anymore. So what is the idea of reviewing? So people just, I heard a lot of developers say, because I'm unsure about, I'm insecure about what's going on here. So maybe another one takes a look at it. And when you take a look at those commits, they are very simple things sometimes, very simple implementation. Sometimes it's just a copy of a function, a little bit differently, and let's go. As I mentioned in the last one, just a change of a headline in a front end app. And this is those things, and those are the majority of changes when you make small batches. They are not worth reviewing.
Exactly.
Period.
Absolutely.
They aren't, because this is a waste of time. Let the people do their things. But of course, you have sometimes more, let's say, architectural things, you have infrastructure changes and all this kind of stuff. Yes, and then when you want to push that, and just ask a colleague, hey, do you have 2 minutes? Can you take a look? I have a question. I'm insecure here. I'm not sure if we can push that. And
so
then you get it done.
Code reviews, to come back a bit, because we did discuss this to some degree. Sorry for interrupting you. We did discuss this to read length last time. Yeah. So Brian mentions compliance, right? So this does speak about a very, let's say, authoritarian, disciplined style of handing off work. So when I say my work is finished, I now deserve pay, I do this lock and key thing with it, where I run it through the machine to bake it. I bake my code, in a way. I compile. I'm consciously not using the word compile, but I'm sort of baking my code and making it permanent in the history, in the vault of the company. That's what these rituals seems to be looking like. And we do have a lot of this in various cultures and other industries that have hazing rituals, where it's like, okay, well, you're a freshman. Like, we don't take you seriously. Like, you don't have access to the master vault. And then you work here for 10 years, and then you get access to the master vault. And then, because my experience with leaders, especially with those who are working in mixed environments and consultants, is that everybody who has sort of this confidence that they have access to the master vault, they do TBD. Everybody who is sort of trying to prove themselves that they are to be trustworthy, they are doing whatever they need to do in order to prove that they are trustworthy so that they can start doing TBD. So there's always this sort of, I wouldn't call it excuse, but maybe this underestimation of authority or maybe just capability in the actual team, the belittling of the team, where TBD is presented as this extremely elite, high bar discipline, but it's easy to learn. Brian even mentioned, just pick up the book and just start doing what's in the book. Ask the question, what prevents you from deploying? What prevents you from separating that which is done from that which is not done?
Mm-hmm.
Can you deploy if you're using sprints, or if you have a monthly plan? If halfway through the month some things are done, can you deploy them? Can you deploy them independently of the things that are not done? That's what TBD is to me. Is when I say, oh, this part here is done, I will now deploy that. Or because I said it's done, it's now committed, and it is by virtue automatically being deployed. Or at least it is being built in a way that is deployable, and then still a human has sort of less say. But I would prefer the human deploying, and maybe the human is just, automation deploying, and then the human just says, okay, now it's deployed, when are we releasing? To have that level of separation as well. But then let's more into the details of CD. Let's stay with trunk-based development. You mentioned code reviews. You mentioned this ritual of confirming, of having compliance, of having two sets of eyes to deter bad actors, as Brian just mentioned. Like 2 sets of eyes to deter bad actors needed for a regulated environment. Pairing should satisfy that, though. I hear this a lot, where people tell me, oh, because of the regulatory stuff, we need to do pull requests and everything. It's like, no, you don't. You just need 2 people in the process, and they can do it synchronously while it's being written. Nobody said that it has to be, 2 weeks apart asynchronously through a slow process. The process can still be fast.
Mm-hmm.
What else is there? What other incentives are there? Your survey said people like doing code reviews, people like doing branches, that there's a level of discounting the future, security that comes with being isolated on your little bubble. What else prevents TPD? What other sort of positively looking incentives are there that are unhealthy if you just look under a hood for a little bit?
Mainly the point, what I hear often is, especially in teams or groups of developers which are not tied internally together.
Mm-hmm.
So you have, let's say external contractors or stuff like this,
Yeah.
and people don't want to have short-term contractors being able to, push into the trunk. It's like they don't know the people, they don't know how they work.
It's a low trust
environment, right? And I can understand this, to be honest, because we saw similar things. And I would say, yes, I can understand this. So mainly, I personally work with internal teams. I prefer working with internal teams. I like to build up a culture, to have this kind of, let's say, this common mindset, this, those, let's say, aligning skill sets and all this kind of stuff. I really like that. And as soon as we get external people inside there, first of all, it's hard to onboard them because they are a little bit off, what you know already. And most of the times they are seniors as well, and they bring their own opinions. Mm-hmm. And that can be a problematic thing when you are in an environment where you practice.
They feel like they're in a cage. Like the system is already constrained, and then you put more constraints on them because they're not really part of the family.
Yeah. On the other hand, onboarding into a TBD process isn't that hard. So we had juniors already, after 1 or 2 weeks working pretty fluently there. Of course, in their scope,
Isn't that an amazing feeling? Like you onboard somebody, like they're still fresh, they're new to the job, and they get to deploy something to production in the first few days or the first few hours of just sitting down in the office and getting situated. Isn't that an amazing feeling? Like how many people miss out on like the real experience of working with a company, of being onboarded, because they get onboarded and then they get hit by wikis and documentation, and nothing that they do really reaches production until like a month or 2 later. Like the difference in the sort of the emotional connection that enables with the team is so significant. Like TBD, in my eyes, TBD is just worth for that moment of You onboard someone, it's like, wow, day one, day two, I already deployed to production. It's so
It
yeah.
is it is even for the development of your developers. You know, this is
The
something
growth,
I
personal.
post quite often. Develop your developers, and
Hmm.
I'm a big believer in that. A junior is is a junior because this person wants to learn. This
Yeah,
person wants to get better. It's not supposed to be a junior for the next years to come.
of course.
So you need to create an environment where people can, learn, thrive, improve, enhance. And you only can do that when you have a system where they are able to work and contribute on a mature level. So they need
Hmm.
to build up maturity and competency. This is
Yes.
those are two key concepts for them, and they must be allowed to make mistakes.
Hmm.
This is why we have the red green pipelines and all this kind of stuff, and implement our tests and all this kind of stuff. But as soon as they know, even as junior developers, I push now to a real system, even with my, let's say,
Hmm.
low level of experience. This triggers so many things in your
Yes.
brain, in your mindset. This is such especially when something goes wrong, then it's such a valuable information stream
Because they
running
know what
through
to
your
do.
head.
They know what
Yeah,
to do. It's not like, oh, I'm usually safe and now something went wrong and now I have to talk to somebody higher up. But they are constantly using the full potential of what is available to them, and
yeah,
they're not feeling like there are like locks in place to sort of
exactly.
belittle
and
their
and
intelligence in being able to just use their production system.
and the result is you can really see week by week how those junior developers really,
Hmm.
gain skill. They
Yes.
really get better. You can see that they suddenly just, take tickets and just, work them down, and it's all good. You see, okay, it's just working. Great. Is it
Hmm.
already a mid-level developer? No, it's not. But it is on the way. And this
Hmm.
is what I really like. And this is what I want to foster and understand by good engineering culture, so that we
Absolutely.
have this progression and that we can focus on the average developer and not only need seniors, to just hire seniors in order to get something done over time. We need to have this kind of cycle in your team. We need to manage, the life cycle of our team as well. And TBD is just a perfect tool or methodology for that.
And to paraphrase what you just said, if you optimize to answer to give homage to that comment of TBD is only for experts. If you optimize your workflow for juniors, it's possible that workflow also prevents them from growing because there's no room, right? If you optimize your workflow for a zero trust environment where it's optimized for juniors, then you will never allow them to make mistakes to the capacity that will allow them to grow and learn and become more
Yeah.
senior and more
I
experienced.
would I would I would correct you. It is not to optimize for juniors. It's to optimize to make juniors not break your things,
Yeah, it's to
and this is
prevent
to
mistakes.
constrain them,
Yeah,
and
because
this is
you don't
wrong.
want to prevent their mistakes. You want to encourage mistakes and lower the negative outcome of their mistakes.
Mhm.
The mistakes will happen no matter what.
And,
So
and, and
you
I
want to
want
create a
to I
safe
want to
environment to mistakes to be made.
Brian just said, you need to mentor. I talk a lot about mentorship. I really like mentorship.
Mhm.
It's a very good
You
form
don't
of it.
infantilize developers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good description of it. Yeah.
And when you just take that, what I mentioned before, that the mature way of working, though, only push things when you are secure and sure that it is good. It is like it's fulfills the definition of done. And
Yes.
especially juniors will not have this security in the beginning, and then they're
Yeah.
going to ask someone. Then someone is coming to them,
And
pairing
then
and help, and this is mentoring already.
yeah.
You know,
Now I
it
see
is.
this a lot with juniors on the teams that I coach because they usually say, I have this on my branch, but I don't know if it works. It's like, okay, is it test covered? Well, I don't know how to write a test for it. It's really complicated. There's a lot of technical depth in the system, and I didn't write most of it. I'm just fixing something. I'm just fixing a bug. So test covering everything now is just this giant behemoth. That seems impossible to them, and because it seems impossible to them, if they're overwhelmed, they just say, okay, let's not. But they don't know whether it works. Then they say, okay, well, what will give you the confidence that this works? Like, what do you want answered so that you will feel confident? I ask them generally in these team therapy sessions. Well, I'm gonna test on stage. Okay, then they go do that, and then I ask them after they test on stage. Okay, what is your level of confidence now that this works in production? Oh, well, I don't know yet. Oh, then why did you test on stage? Well, because I wanted to know whether I can merge it, whether I merge it correctly. Ah, so you merged it. Well, I didn't merge it yet, but I sort of pulled in trunk into my branch, and then I tested it on stage to make sure that I did that correctly. It's like, okay, so there's a artificial step there. Okay, so now it's ready to merge. Well, no, I need to still test if it works. Interesting. Manually, yes, there's no test. Okay, they go and do that, right? So they go and test it. It's like, okay, I tested it, it works. Okay, on staging. Okay, cool. What is your level of confidence that it works in production? Well, I don't know. 70%? Okay, what will make that 100%? I don't know. Like, do you understand what you did? Do you understand the problem? And usually they don't. But generally the quick answer I get is, well, I think this is now ready to deploy, so I'll merge it. And I'm emphasizing sort of the key moments here where we sort of lower the distance from the branch to the main line, and they merge it, and then they deploy it. And then when they deploy it, they still check, they observe it. And then if there's no problems, then 2 days later, they're like happy. And then 2 days later, they close the ticket. But every junior is capable of doing this. And these are actually good practices. But it's in the wrong order. Right? The order is wrong. Right? So when I like to say TBD is when you order the work correctly. Right? Because what did they do? Now let's rewind. Were you paying attention on my emphasis? Like the confidence for production, merging trunk into their branch first, trying it on staging. Then now it kind of works, but I'm not confident yet. So now they're merging it back. They didn't deploy it, and they test it there. Then they leave it there, and then they go work on something else while they observe it. Right? Like that was the flow. Now I think the idea that, well, I don't think, I'm sort of almost fanatically convinced that the idea of TBD is to say, we will merge when it's mergeable, not when it's done. Because the positive observability on production, that will tell us when it's actually done. When I have confirmation that my assumption of why it's valuable to the customer, when I have confirmation on that, and I maybe capture revenue, or I get a checkbox from head of product, or maybe we deployed something that had nothing to do with money. Maybe we just deployed something as a branding authority feature. Maybe we just needed to give our users something, access to something, visual to something. Once I know that our assumption of, yes, this feature actually gives them that we want, so that is the observability step that even the junior did. Once I know that, then I know that it's done. But I won't block this idea that I will merge and make it valuable, and then I will block deployment until I sort of have a gut feeling that I'm confident that it will be valuable, because it's not knowable. See, the thing is, they want to know something that is not knowable. Like however I structure the work, the confidence of whether this will be valuable in production is not knowable until we actually test it on the market. Now, however, you can test whether it is safe to merge. You can test whether it breaks any regression. So whether it breaks anything that we already know. So those are all the tests. Tests are all the regressions we already know or have planned for. So even if you've never deployed it before, just virtue of having planned it and designed it, that you can know, so that you can test. It's just the unknowable stuff that for new features you don't know. So that's why it needs integration and contact with the market as soon as possible. So usually with TBD, I always say, don't delay deploy based on your confidence that it will be valuable or safe to merge. Make it safe to merge, even if it doesn't work yet. But just make it safe to merge so that somebody can come and help you. Make it safe to merge so that we can deploy it so that we see whether it has any unexpected side effects of just deploying it even when it's turned off. If we can't deploy it turned off, maybe there's a bigger problem we're missing. Maybe that needs to be addressed right now. Right? So if you can't turn the feature off and deploy it with your feature flag or with your feature gate or with anything, if even that is complicated, maybe we should address that complication now. Right? Like that's the important part. That's what integration is. If you're, I can't deploy because I have backwards incompatible database migrations. Well, that problem won't go away. And it won't get any easier if you stay isolated for a month. So let's do that now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, but I don't need it now. Yes, but you'll have the safety of knowing that it works.
That's what it won't get. It will get worse. Let's say
it will
not get better. It will get worse.
Yes.
So you should always. It is that this is something we can, or I can recommend to anyone out there in general, not just for software developers. Get your stuff done. Things don't solve themselves in the real world. So this is a rare occasion. In most cases, it's better to sort your stuff out now and not later. And if you have an open, an open change and you want to get it to the trunk, then do it. Don't wait for it. Or some have those IDE options like shelf changes and all this kind of stuff. Don't do that. Bring them live. Don't shelf them somewhere. You will forget them, and this is the problem. And then you realize, I had something there, and you are in this outdated, second backlog stuff again. And get the stuff out, because
inventory. It's just inventory of
right.
I have done, I have unmerged done, I have merged untested done, I have untested unmerged done, and I have in progress done that is really messy and not test covered. And then there is the done QA but found an issue, sort of, we need to hotfix this, but we deployed it and then reverted, and now it's sort of waiting there to redeploy it again. Done. I think you don't want that.
Yeah, especially like imagine just an example now for every developer. So imagine you have a week where 2 developers are working on very specific things in your code base, and one developer is going for a big refactor session.
Yeah.
And everyone is working in branches.
The developer will need.
Yeah. Good luck by the end of the week.
No way. And then that's why they don't refactor.
You better take vacation as a tech lead in this time.
Exactly. I surveyed the teams because I do a lot of qualitative. I can't measure using quantitative metrics, so I survey them usually in 3-month intervals.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the main things they don't refactor. They say, well, everybody's on so long-lived branches that if I refactor anything, I will just make everybody's life miserable. And I always say, just refactor and merge it immediately, independent of the feature you're building. Kent Beck talks about this a lot in his, he has a new book on Tidy First. He just says, don't mix refactoring with adding new features. If you want something refactored, integrate immediately. Like integrate it immediately on trunk. Get it to everybody as soon as possible. Never mind the customers. It's valuable already when it supports the other developers in the team. Think about your team first. It's valuable to them. Imagine if you just added a test to something and it makes a process a lot easier. Give it to your team as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they will learn something from it. Maybe they will use it and then actually make them more productive on their feature. Just get it to them first, and then treat them with respect, and then treat the customers with respect. Just when it's done, give it to them. Don't couple it together. Like in a way, TBD is about decoupling change. Like, don't couple the thing that works to the thing that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? Because then, I had a conversation today with one of the Scrum Masters and the team that I'm coaching, and we're sort of sharing responsibilities on this sort of the coaching aspect, and we got into this question, which is a really good point that they presented, was that, how did they phrase it? Is that they want to test it to make sure that it works, and then they will merge it. And then I said, no, our goal is not to test it and then merge it. Our goal is to merge it so that we can test it. Because when you're testing it before it's merged, you're testing it in an unintegrated state. So when you merge it, it'll take so much time for that to happen that we'll have to test it again before we deploy. It's like, yeah, we will do that. But then you're testing twice. And you might find a bug on the second testing that you did in the first one. And then we'll have to, branch it again and do it again. Like, that's just synthetic work. And I mentioned that the whole point is not about, Agile, what Agile is about. Agile is about, if you have a sprint and it's 5 days in the week, and I like using this analogy, I want certainty. That's what Agile is about. It's not about management. It's about certainty. It's about splitting up work in such a way that you always communicate with certainty.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you an example. I can tell you, I have a large task, and I know that starting on a task, that is absolute. I know that is always correct. I have full certainty that I am not lying when I say I have started on this task. And also, I have full certainty that I am not lying when I say I have finished the task. Okay, so started and finished, full certainty, no speculation. The problem is when the task is so large that somebody says, hey, this task over there, it's not done. Yes. When will it be done? And that is the worst question. That is the worst question, because how do developers interpret that? As how much work is left. And that is the wrong way of going about this question. Because the correct way of going about this is that, oh, this is what I have done. And I'm going to stop work and I'm going to deploy it. That's what should happen. Because they get pressured by the question, thinking that they need to go faster to reach the end. So if you have 5 tasks in a week, what you want to do is, if you split them up in such a way that they're sort of equally sized, if you're very good at sizing your tasks, what you want to be doing is you just want to communicate that which is certain. You don't want each ticket to have 3 pipelines: done, not done, and progress. You just want it to be done and not done. And then you want them to be in such a small granularity that you can just say, oh, we had 10 things to do and we did done 3 things. So I'm assuming we're 30% there if our accuracy of sizing tickets is consistent. That's what you want. That's what Agile is about. And that's the whole point with TBD as well, because it is forcing you to think in this idea of, okay, if it's done, then deploy it, right? So TBD, contrary to like long-lived branches, is this idea of, if it's 20% done, then it should be 20% deployable. What we don't want is it's 20% done and it's 0% deployable. Because what is the reality there? It's 0% done. Now imagine that I invest a week and it's 0% done. And I invest another week and it's 0% done. This drives management nuts. And what will they do? Micromanage. Hey, this thing has been 0 for 3 weeks now. What's going on? And they will pry it open. They will open up the engine and start fiddling with the process. The problem isn't even, and they will ask for estimates, God forbid estimates. And then everything slows down because now everybody's working on the wrong thing. Everybody's trying
and all this kind of stuff.
Exactly. And then it's 30% done in reality, 0% deployable. And then everybody's spending a lot of time estimating the remaining 70. But the real problem is, why is this 30% that's done not deployable? Why is it not mergeable? That's the real issue. And that's the KPI that I like to say that TBD provides. It provides the answer of, if this is done, it should be deployable. Not it will be deployable and done when it's mergeable and tested for full functionality and proof that it's valuable to the end customer. But as you are done every day, just make everything you do mergeable and deployable today.
This is actually a great advice for getting stress out of the team.
Yes,
because most of the let's be honest, most of the stressful situations developers face is not that they actually not able to find the right solution now. It's about the pressure to find the right solution now.
Yes,
because finding or finding solutions is actually quite fun when in a side project, for example. Sometimes you sit hours there and fiddling out and take a look at Stack Overflow or AI or whatever. But it's another thing when some stakeholders just stand behind you and asking you, what's going on with you? You want to finish.
Yes.
And this is one of the worst situations you can have. So this is great advice. So we need to write about that.
Me too, definitely need to write. We need clips about this. Hey, YouTube. I just wanted to mention, one of the questions I often get asked is sort of touching on what Alex mentions here in the comment. That TBD services the pain points. In my experience, people can then naively see TBD as painful. And I think that I think Alex really nailed where that idea of it's only for experts comes from, because it seems painful. Whereas when you dig deeper, it has simply exposed something that needed fixing. Yes, so I think that this just highlights that: are you taking your work seriously and the pain is there and you have to address it? Or are you okay with not addressing the pain? Like, are you okay with running your ship at a lower standard? If yes, then TBD obviously seems like it's a dragon. But if you want to achieve a high standard, then TBD exposes everything that you can improve to get to that standard. And that's why TBD exposes if your tickets are too large, TBD exposes if your pull requests take too long, TBD exposes if you're a feature factory, TBD exposes if people are being infantilized, as Brian mentioned, like, and you're not taking your developers seriously and you're not really giving them access to the tools that they need. He mentions, but it's not valuable until it's done. Knowing it doesn't break anything is valuable. Knowing that any breaks will be tiny is valuable. Reducing inventory risk is valuable. And this idea, reducing inventory risk, I have seen so many outdated branches, like months old, half a year old. When people tell me, Dennis, there was this feature here in this branch, what should we do about it? And I say, delete it. Like, even the fact that nobody's asking for it, like somebody asks for it, it took too long. It's like that food analogy in the restaurant. It's like, if it takes too long to cook, I will leave. So if the food is now there cold on a branch, I don't care about it anymore. Just delete it. Chuck it in the bin. Oh, but we invested time into building it. Yes, but it took too long. You didn't ask for feedback fast enough. It's like, no, but it's work. Somebody who is attached to this. It's like, yeah, but you can't drive a business on ego. Like, you gotta say no to, like, be happy that you're removing code from the context. It's usually the biggest problem. It reminds me, Alex did mention a large question that I didn't put on the screen because we were still... Okay, here it is. In my experience, it's been much easier to get front-end dev bought into TBD, given that the front-end is by its nature more ephemeral and always changing. Has been a harder sell to backend devs where their APIs are consumed by multiple subscribers and they are more wary about breaking changes, and the workarounds for this with TBD feel more onerous. Does that ring true for you too? Any advice regarding API design and trunk-based development?
So I would like to add something to that as answer. Because in my opinion, I understand what Alex is saying there, but in my opinion, front-end developers, they work quite closely together with back-end developers, especially when you have, let's say, not like the landing page creator. I'm talking about app creation, progressive web apps, native apps. So this kind of apps. So you are highly, dependent on the back-end developers as well. And I think the bigger challenge is there to get this, those two things together in TBD. This is the more, let's say,
it's about integration. Front-end teams always integrate with something in the backend, right? Unless it's like those weird micro front-ends that are just using public APIs. But I think that's a stark minority.
So I don't. What I wanted to say is I don't see a big difference between front-end and back-end developers. It's more like you need to get the entire team culture done because you have a common goal. So it's not about those guys have an easy life and those not. So it's a common goal. So you need to work together. The back-end people need to talk and communicate with the front-end people in order to get the integrated version out there without breaking everything and without running into a red light situation for the whole evening. And this is what I think about that. And my context is always in the app development, not in, let's say, some website development. For me, that is that is a quite easy part. You can do whatever you want there. It's always good in some point. But the real app development, where you have large code bases, monorepositories, many people working on that stuff. We have a lot of integration, sometimes composable architecture, where you integrate other SaaS stuff. So those things are very interesting, and there everyone has its challenges with it.
Vladi, one of the leaders I coach, asked me today, because I made, Brian, but Brian has another suggestion for Alex, evolutionary contract change. So every API with a versioning scheme, so just do it on trunk, don't touch, treat your old code as read-only, and then just add the new APIs rather than modifying existing ones. It's easy to copy the API and just make changes to the copy, right? So that's how you get easy versioning. Don't use your versioning control system to version your APIs.
Isn't that what
Balázs? I think Balázs asked that. And we talked about it. Like the SEM versioning, the semantic versioning. It's a property of your product, not of your code. You don't want to expose your version control system's versioning schema to version your backend API. Make sure there's a folder somewhere in your backend, not in Git, but in your folder that says version 2 and version 1. That's how you version and make them continuously integratable. But just explicitly saying the new version is in a new folder, and everything not in the new folder is backward compatible with the old API. That's how Shopify does their versioning systems. They roll out a new version that has a date, and there's only things that are new to that date that are in that version. Everything else is backward compatible with the previous versions. So cumulatively backward compatible. From a certain point, and then you have that legacy v1. It's like, oh, these new versions, and then legacy v1. like most APIs are like that. Like they are not monotonically increasing. It just has a version, and then there's a break, and then there's monotonically increasing inside the break, and then there's another break. Just make those breaks visible in your folder structure of your actual source code. Do not use version control systems to version your product. The version control system is there to version your source code history, the work that you did, not the output that you produced.
Yeah.
Right. So that's really important. Don't mix these two responsibilities. It's to version the same thing about your deployment artifact. When you have two versions of the system, those are two different deployment artifacts. There's that. Yeah, and especially, I need help there. Purushottam? Did I pronounce that correctly? Great discussion. We're not even talking about front-end framework development. You'll be surprised how many branches they create based on target device and trying to merge in trunk later. Yeah, but every device that you support is an infrastructure level concern. So every device that you support needs to be in your mainline trunk repository as a separate concept, not on different branches on the same version control system, and then you sort of release from different branches. That's what Gitflow was sort of trying to do, but failed at. Like, don't model that for different platform deployments. Just have it on the same source code and just have a different folder for it. That's what folders are for. But I just want to mention this comment. So Vladi, one of the leaders I'm coaching, they called me out. I was being a little bit facetious regarding saying, oversimplifying, that when I said, ideally, if everybody, the entire team, was monotasking on a single task together as an ensemble, we wouldn't need sprints, we wouldn't need management. Everybody would be working the fastest way possible, and we would know exactly all the time how far we are. And they asked me, Dennis, if everybody's working, I don't think that's correct, he said, because we don't know whether that's the fastest way of working. I had to think about it, and I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, what I said is not correct. We actually don't know that that's the fastest way of working. But at least the team agrees how much is done. Because if the team is not monotasking, if the team is split up into, let's say, 4 parallel features on 4 parallel branches, then when I ask the question, when will this team be done so that they can work on something else or iterate on what we find drives from product feedback, they won't agree on what the answer to that question is. And then we'll need a meeting. And then rather than saying done, not done, we'll be investing time into estimating progress. Right? So nobody can agree on how much progress was done because nothing is done. Nothing was done. Right? So we will have meetings about progress. And then progress will be measured subjectively. And I said that is why we slow down. When everybody is working on the same thing together, at least we agree on how much progress was done. So then you don't need to manage this team. Because then if there's 4 people working on 4 different things, now every team, every squad, every sub-team of that team, they're not really a team, like every group doesn't know about what the other 3 groups are doing. So you need a manager. But the manager is not part of the team. So the manager doesn't know what the team is doing. And the team is not, the groups don't know what the other groups are doing. So they need to stop work to report. And then the report will be misunderstood. So then that requires more meetings. That's why I said that they'll be slower, because there's more process. There's more rituals involved with just trying to guess what the correct progress report is. And that's one of the worst wastes in software. When a project is going according to plan and the correct answer is when it's done. And this is how much is done right now. And it's this second part that's usually missing. Because usually when people want progress reports, they should just say, oh, this much is done. Okay, why is it not released? That's what we should be focusing on. But usually how these conversations go is, what's the progress report? Oh, we're not done yet. Why? When will you be done? Well, we're sort of 20% there. And for the remaining 80%, I don't know. Okay, can you estimate the remaining 80%? Yeah, I think the remaining 80% will take about 140% of the time that we assign to it. The real question we should be asking is, what of the 20% that is done is valuable to the customer and we can deploy and start capturing revenue with today? That's what we should be focusing on. Because if the answer is nothing of the 20% that we did so far is valuable, that is a huge red flag. That means that somebody is not prioritizing work correctly. And it's the teams, the engineering teams, the developers, who need to hold whoever's prioritizing accountable to this procedure. It's like, I have invested a lot of effort into making this 20%. You're telling me I can't interrupt work to deploy this because it's not valuable? Who's running this ship? That's the conversation we need to have. And that's the uncomfortable thing at the core of all of these practices. Because people think, if we just manage everything, if we have full observability, everything will be okay. That's not the point. The point is that sometimes we just create waste and nobody wants to admit it. It's like, this thing on the branch, nobody really wants it. So can we just make it go away and continue on something else? Like that's a mature way of dealing with it, rather than saying, we created something we don't need. Like maybe we can repurpose it in the future. Can we just abstract it away and maybe try to reuse this for some other client? That speculative stuff, that's such a waste of time.
And it's always good, as you said, to get your stuff out as soon as possible. Are you still there? So I think he's gone.
I'm sorry.
Again. So
it was the first time. It was the first time that I did this. I'm sorry. I misclicked the back button on my mouse.
I felt quite lonely, but yes. So getting things out. So imagine let's get something practical. Imagine you get a task where you need to actually or maybe a set of tasks where you need to deploy on the next days several fixes, for example. Because there was a testing thing, and you get some feedback. You need to implement this, and every of those fixes, let's say it's 10 fixes you need to do. So it's basically 100%, or every fix is 10% of the 100%.
Yeah.
Then you would basically deploy every fix by itself, just get it out. One fix, one commit, one push, get it out, get it to the client. So you have every time you push.
Is definition of done.
Exactly. So you have basically incremental new value to the client until you have 100%. And when you are, reaching, let's say 60%, and you get into a meeting where, a business person wants to know your progress, then you can say, we already delivered 60%. This is a whole different story when you say, we already done something around 60%, but we haven't. Actually, for the business person, it's 0, as you said. And the thing is, you don't know if the last, 40% will take, the estimated amount of time, because we are in software development. We always estimate wrong.
Yes.
I did that for 20 years. So I know what I'm talking about.
Same.
So
I have 15
you can't.
years.
You
15 years
simply
plus.
can't.
Yes.
There are unforeseen circumstances. You don't know. It's impossible. So, but when you have deployed already or delivered already, take it as you wish, the stuff you already created, then you can say, but wait, we already delivered something. Okay.
Yes.
So this, lowers the stress for everyone. And this is so valuable to have actually a good, a balanced culture in your life. So you can go home and I have delivered something.
And it's also signal to the product owners, to the Scrum masters, to the Agile masters, whatever master they have, to tell them, look, definition of done on your ticket is not doneable in a day. So our work tasks are too large. You can't increment on this, because if anything goes wrong, it goes wrong by a week or two. This is not precise enough. We need to work on smaller things together as a team. Put our heads together to work on smaller things. And I like Brian's take on this. And he said focus on CI and not TBD. Give them the information about how CI makes developers' lives better. I think he was mentioning, I lost chat history, I'm sorry, but I do have it on my other screen. He mentioned Gary Groover's work on Hewlett-Packard's LaserJet firmware. Because then that's a case study of 800 developers working with continuous integration on trunk. So I think CI with TBD. So if anybody wants that case study, it's in chat. Thank you, Brian. And just as a fix, Purushottam earlier meant firmware projects, not framework projects. I misunderstood context. But I like the second part that Brian mentions. The only reason I'm loud about it is because it hurts less than any other way of working. And I hate seeing other developers in pain. This is so much in line with Kent Beck's, Kent Beck invented TDD or rediscovered TDD to help developers manage their anxiety with delivering code that they don't know whether it works or not, or whether it can even be tested. Like TDD is an anxiety management tool, and TBD and CI is a certainty management tool. Like instead of guessing what the progress is, I tell you with high degree, absolute certainty, this is how much is done. And the amount of which is done is to 100% deployable. That's the point of TBD. It communicates certainty to management. If any manager wants absolute certainty about what their development team is doing, introduce TBD. This is the biggest thing you can do to boost the level of professionalism in your communication, because people stop guessing. I hate conversations about, I think we're halfway there. I think we're like 70% done. And the remaining 30 will take 2 more months. Maybe, and then that was 2 more guesses. And then nobody, because developers.
And this is then where developers are in pain, as Brian just said.
Yes.
So it's actually exactly that.
The point is, there is no alternative that is not painful. It's just the least painful way of dealing with this.
Yeah, we are problem solvers. So solving a problem under stress is always pain and is always a bad thing. Yes. But we choose to do that, as developers. So in some point, we love that as well. So we need to find a way which is actually good for us, for our team, for our company to work with. And this is about culture. So, culture is not a naive idea. So it is about getting things done in a continuously constant way, and you can't do that when you don't have a culture in place which actually focuses on that. And branches are let's say, an anti-pattern for this culture, because it does basically quite the opposite. You go into isolation, and try to.
Then you have to guess what the progress is.
Yes. Exactly. You try to have some kind of security you don't really get from it.
I just want to thank our regular viewers. So Thomas is here again, and Max. I haven't heard anything from you, Max. If you're here with us, it would be great to have a live sign. Thomas just mentioned, right? Like he can't measure. I can't put it on the screen. I'm sorry. I lost history. But Thomas mentioned that he can't measure in percentages. He's always wrong, right? So, but that's what we force our developers to do. If the work tasks are so large that they need to be isolated in branches, And then we ask them, hey, there's no life sign. Progress seems to be 0. What is actual progress? And then everybody's stopping work to guess how much is the progress.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, like personally, that just hurts me, because then I see a team that is overwhelmed and they're so close to the finish line, and they stop work and they start producing waste estimates, some subjective idea of how far along are we. Just tell them how far along we are. 0, because nothing's deployed. Oh no, that's not true, because no. It's nothing is deployable. As far as they're concerned, their outcomes, the customers, we made 0 progress.
This is what I can say as a CTO now, who's working a lot with other business persons, CEOs, clients, and all this kind of stuff.
Non-technical, non-engineering.
Exactly. So as soon as you can show something, everyone is at least not pissed off anymore. So this is the first, the first step to happiness is getting the people not pissed about you and your development organization. And you can of course improve that by progressively pushing out things, because the people don't want to see, or they understand that you cannot finish things maybe in time. Maybe it's it goes over the estimation, all this kind of stuff. People understand when they understand what you actually do. And this is what the tech leads out there in the audience now, developers should understand. They don't want you to be finished on time. They want to, they see business opportunities there.
Yes.
And what we in the CSU try to do is get those business opportunities onto the market, try to get value out of that for everyone.
Actionable. Yes.
Exactly.
There's nothing worse than there being a business opportunity and the team is not ready.
Yeah.
The team is busy.
And
then you ask them, when can we react to this business opportunity? The team says, I don't know, maybe in 3 months when we're done with this feature.
So just let's say in a timeline. Let's say you have a project for 12 months, 1 year. You estimated it, and it will take 2 months more to actually release it.
Yes,
it is totally fine when you already see that in month 9. Everyone understands. Every stakeholder does know about it and is aware about that, then everything is fine. It will be extended. It's not ideal, but everyone understands. But if you are basically in month 12 and you then say, we can't release. Why? Actually, we are not far enough. How long does it take? We don't know exactly, because you don't know in that moment that it will take 2 months more.
But there might be 11 months worth of stable stuff.
Yeah.
Coupled to 1 month's worth of panicked last minute changes, and those 11 months cannot be released.
For example, of course, if we talk about a new app, for example, maybe it's not finished for mass market, but you already could have started with some smaller markets, internal markets, testing, real world testing, something, already create value, feedback, all this kind of stuff, the first iterations, but you don't have anything released yet. And this is what people need to understand. Stress in our industry is created by not delivering anything. Yes. This is the biggest problem I faced in my last years.
I think most of the stress in our industry is caused by this kind of branching strategy. It's isolated and unreleasable state. It sort of moves the needle from 0% to 100% in one step. And that's fine if that's an hour or a day. If that's a week, then that's already problematic. Because then I don't know on Monday whether it's 0 or 100. Then on Tuesday, I don't know whether it's a 0 or 100 as a manager, as a CTO, as a non-technical, as a product owner, as a VP of product. I don't know whether, I don't know which day we go from 0 to 100. And that scares me. I don't want to drive a car like that. I want to be on a train and I want it to sort of pick up speed, and then I don't want it to stop needlessly. That's how you want to run a stable business, just incrementally pick up speed. It's like how a satellite accelerates to large velocities. It's like just slowly ramping up speed. That's what you want, consistent incremental change. We didn't touch yet on this idea of how to use the strengths of your team. I always like to say, if the team is really strong in testing, just cram everything into the main line and test the main line. together. If the team is really strong at feature flagging or isolation, start doing that. Start really adding release gates, feature flags into the system, and use that more than you do branches. Just branch using that, right? Copy things. If the team is really good at just hacking away and experimenting, that's great. But please make a copy. Don't hack the existing thing. Just make a copy, hack the copy, and then release both. Then have a feature flag between them.
Mm-hmm.
That is such an easy way of refactoring things. And that it's like incrementally treating your source code with backward compatibility in mind. And sometimes that won't be possible. Sometimes there's like some underlying.
There is no perfect way, but you need to find a way which is actually fitting the context of your team, which is, each individual. So as I said, I actually, the latter example is something we have often in our team. So it's like we need to get things out. We have several projects at the same time. Sometimes developers switch between projects. I don't like that, but it's the reality. And and you actually need to do you need to act on this. So this is never it's never an ideal situation, but you need to utilize the strength of the individuals of your team. So it is not like every team is exactly working with the same exact methods and tools and stuff like that, but always keep in mind, as we said now in the last 1.5 hours, what's the idea behind it. So that in my opinion should always be the same. So we should have the common goal to deliver value as soon as possible, as constantly as possible. It doesn't mean that we need to really bring that out every day with every commit to the production system. So it doesn't need to be like that. It's not like that in our organization, and you can still do continuous integration and delivery. It's possible. It's about the idea and the mindset to get things done this way and to improve the overall outcome, reduce the stress level, increase the continuity and all this kind of stuff. So that you actually create win-win-win situations. This is what you should aim for.
We had a team therapy session today on our tactical coaching session. I just noticed that there was something in the air, and I sort of went into team therapy mode. Because I saw that the team was optimizing for business. The team was optimizing for, trying to get as much things moving forward as possible. And I saw that interrupted flow. So Agile and I think team topologies and other flow conferences talk about this. Like, don't optimize for the pipeline to be full. Optimize for the flow inside the pipeline. Kanban is this essentially. And even when I see Scrum teams use Scrum boards, I emphasize, please use a Kanban board. At the very least, use a Kanban board. So, and let's take a real limit. Every time you start to sprint, let's decide, okay, what is the maximum monotasking we can do? Everybody on the same ticket. Okay, so if there's 5 people on the team, let's make the in progress cap 2, so that we force 2 groups of ensembles all the time. And then when I saw today, there was like 1 person with 2 unfinished branches. And then a 3rd person asking, okay, what should I do? It's like, well, take one of those branches and finish them. Because that's what optimizing flow means. Optimizing flow means that things are moving from one column to the other column. Flow doesn't mean that we just start working on something because we're anxious that it's not finished yet and the deadline is looming. Right? So the flow optimization is about making sure everything goes out to production as soon as possible, especially if it's already in a semi-finished state. And sometimes, I will rephrase that, most of the time, if something has been stuck for days, rather than finishing it, don't finish it. Just deploy what's finished already and then finish it. Oftentimes, that is the best solution. Because if you deploy and then nobody bats an eyelash, nobody's like, yeah, but we didn't really need this. Like, I want that other thing. Then you don't spend the other half of the time working on something because they want that other thing. And then when they get that other thing, then they can tell you, okay, should I now go back and finish that? No. Okay, I will remove it then. Right? But if you go and finish the task first, then you'll be under stress because you know that you need to finish that, need to start it out. Like, please, can you finish X so you can start on A? No, just stop X. Deploy what's done with X if that's possible. And then go do A immediately. If you know that somebody's already communicating value or maybe anxiety, or maybe just the client really needs this, At the beginning of the project, we didn't know what was important. Now we know that this is the important part. Maybe it's just the loudest part. Maybe we're not measuring enough on the other sides, but at least by following the loudest bit, we can at least measure, okay, why did we prioritize this? Or because this unimportant thing had a good signal and that important thing had a bad signal. Okay, so let's measure that important bit the same way we just measured this unimportant bit, and then we can learn something from that. That's valuable. But just get what's done deployed. Don't finish it. I urge, do not incentivize perfectionist urges in your team. Don't finish stuff. Get it done. Done means that you can start working on something else. That's what done means. If the product is a feature that you thought took 2 days, is now a week in and is not finished, close, like clamp down what's done and deploy it. And then decide whether you want to finish the rest. Right? Because if the first half is not valuable, it's possible the second half also isn't. Especially if you're now having meetings about whether this is still a priority or not. Like take this seriously. As Brian just said, perfect never ships. Yes, because perfect takes too long. By the time you get it to perfect, you have been ignoring so much market information that the market has moved on. And now something else is perfect in their eyes. We had another question that I want to address before we go sort of start wrapping up. Alex had a question. He said, in my experience, trunk-based development is a practice similar to others like pair programming that needs to be grokked. You just need to get it. And Brian mentioned this a lot. Like, you try it. Like, it's hard to convince people, but once they try it, they never go back. It needs to be experienced to really get it. Any advice for getting skeptical teams over that initial barrier and getting them to try it without railroading or forcing change? What a great question. How would you inspire somebody to try TBD without mandating it, Adrian? Other than watching this,
let's say
episode.
What I often say is we want to be happy with our work. So it's not about let's now, we've talked a lot about business and this kind of stuff. Now let's get to the level of the developers. You want to be happy, and what is the foundation of happiness? It's progress. So you need to progress in some ways. If you don't have progress, you can't be happy. That's actually the foundation. So now imagine you walk the street, and you have 1 kilometer to go, or 1 mile. So it doesn't matter. So you walk just, 100 meters and you need to stop because you need to wait for someone to tell you can go on. And you want to get to the finish line. And someone, 2 hours later, you are allowed to now walk again. And after 200 meters, another one, you need to stop again, and another one needs to tell you to go on. So you are not in progress. So when you just want to go your mile or your 1 kilometer, then just go it. Just go through. You need to have the notion or the idea that you're actually going this mile now. So you need to be in progress. You need to be able to, even being exciting about walking that now, because you go from A to B in one go. And this is my understanding of progress and why we're working that way. So we want to have the feeling to be in motion, and being in motion is something a human likes to be. So you don't want to stay, don't want to stagnate, and don't want to have or run into problems. And this is how I would try to convince people to try understand why TBD is better, in my opinion, for the entire process, for your mindset, for your, let's say, your mental health in your team and all this kind of stuff on all levels, because you are in progress and you make progress.
You're not asking for permission to make progress.
Right. In progress in terms of product, progress in terms of skills, product in terms of team culture and mindset, you make progress, period.
You're in control of your fate, essentially.
Yeah. Progress is the foundation of happiness.
Awesome. Wow. What a great idea to close on. Is there anything else we'd like to discuss? We have some time left. I just want to sort of take it slow now towards the end. What else do you want to open up now? Shall we talk about the article?
My article. Yeah, it should be released right now. So I don't have a mouse at the moment because...
I do. Can I help?
Yeah, I can show it. I don't know. But actually, so the article is about what we've discussed the last 2 weeks. So starting with the last stream, with the discussions in between, with all the posts, and there was so much feedback. It took me 2 days to just sort the feedback. It came from all sides, and there were some other discussions as well. And I tried to wrap everything up, try to be very balanced. So it's there, this article is not about my opinion. It's about what's the LinkedIn and Slack groups I am in. The audience idea is actually about branching, code reviews, and trunk-based development as well. It was basically a third topic then. And this is quite interesting to see. So it was entirely different. So the result was entirely different than I thought it would be. Because there were so many, let's say, podcasts and articles about why you should go with trunk-based development and all this kind of stuff. I was assuming most of the people are already there in this area, but it isn't the case. Majority isn't yet. So at least from the feedback I've got. And so it's I would invite everyone to read that article. It's basically about a lot of feedback. People are mentioned inside there. There are footnotes. You can just take a look who wrote what and what's the actual opinion about that. And I will do something similar now for the next week to come with trunk-based development and our findings there.
Yes.
And I think it's very important to get the people together on LinkedIn, because we are always posting and commenting, but no one is actually wrapping those things up. We just referencing to websites. We say, okay, in this company said this or something like that. But what's about the LinkedIn community? So I just want to go a little bit more into the direction of having a community who's talking about that, and having, as you mentioned, maybe some kind of brainstorming sessions, therapy sessions. Maybe people realize because of other LinkedIn, for example, audience members, maybe this is the same situation I am in. So maybe I get some inspiration how I can improve things, And it's not about convincing people that you do something wrong with branching. This is not my intention. This is just giving you the idea and real life experience, of course, of myself. The years I've bleed a lot. I had a lot of pain, and to see what others actually do as well and have their experiences summed up. And this is what I try to do in the next month and weeks to come as well. So feel invited if you like to join that.
And I also have a TDD similar, like a qualitative sort of data gathering survey that I did a while ago, and I'm going to publish that as well. I just checked your Substack. It's not live yet, so something might have gone wrong there on the time zone. I would have shown it otherwise.
I will take a look in a minute then.
Okay. In the context of invitations, while not directly sponsoring the stream, Plato did sponsor my newsletter for this week, and they've empowered me to sort of share a free ticket raffle with you guys if you want to join the Elevate conference in San Francisco, which is in November, which is in about a month. So I will drop the link in the chat now. It's a raffle for a free ticket for the conference. Like, this means a lot to me because this is one of our first physical sponsorships where somebody gets to travel somewhere. And I'm excited because when I started work as a junior engineer in the first company that I coded for, I got something similar. So I got a trip to San Francisco to go visit Google I/O. And for me, just being able to see my mentors, my idols, that meant a lot to me. Because it meant that the books I'm reading, that they're written by people who are still alive. And that seemed very ephemeral to me. And so on this conference, you'll be able to hear Kent Beck live if you're following Kent's work. So again, they're not sponsoring the stream directly. They were sponsored the Crafting Tech Team's newsletter. Just wanted to drop this link for you guys to get a last chance of checking it out if you're traveling there, if you're in that area. One other thing I wanted to mention is that in terms of trunk-based development and everything we're discussing, Adrian and I are discussing here, and I'm addressing you, the audience now. That what we're discussing here is by no means a way of saying, hey, you need to do this or you're doing it wrong. There are, like, context is very much an important factor. You might have reasons for why you're doing things the way you're doing. I would always focus on the question of not what is wrong in our process. That question can give you a lot of answers that are not actionable. And the worst thing you can do as, let's say, I wouldn't say inexperienced, but just not having had contact with working on like a really high performing team and doing everything right, just not having that touch point in your history yet. If you just follow LinkedIn, there are so many things that everybody's telling you that you're doing wrong, that if you analyze your workspace, your process, you will see that you're doing almost everything wrong. And that's not helpful. Because that means that there's a million things to improve. And that is the definition of anxiety. Anxiety isn't that there isn't anything to do. Anxiety is that there is too much things to do and you don't know where to start. So my point is always, regardless of what we say, try to figure out what the biggest problem is in your team. Now, if you're a developer, if you're a tech lead, if you're an engineering manager, VPE, CTO, focus on the biggest problem. Just one. There might be many, but just the biggest problem. And then figure out whether that biggest problem is actually a root cause problem or just a symptom. And just explore that one thing and improve on it. See how much you can improve on it in a week. I don't know if Brian is still in chat, but Brian is with us as somebody who has done one of the biggest, like, CI/CD, TBD cultural shifts in one of the largest Fortune 500s in the US. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but it took years. It wasn't an overnight success. And everybody knew that the process would be painful, especially at the beginning. But just qualitatively assess that, yes, this is our biggest problem, and I'm confident this is what we need to work on. Start with that. Don't fix 10 things at the same time. Don't do, okay, Dennis and Adrian told me no more code reviews, no more pull requests, no more branches, no more quality gate checks, no more juniors, no more seniors, no titles. And we're deploying every day except on Fridays, but we do deploy on Sunday because we're hardcore, right? So it's all this weird advice mishmashed together. Because in a way, that's what it's construed at on LinkedIn. If you combine everything that we do, and sometimes we do sometimes I say some stupid things as a hook to get attention to the post. And it's just not helpful to combine that all those hooks, all that polarizing communication, to combine it and to then judge yourself with it. It is not helpful. Your context for your team is different. Never mind Google. Never mind Netflix. Different context. Never mind guilds. Never mind squads. Never mind tribes. Never mind whatever Google does. They have in-house tools for everything. They're not even using Git. They're not using Jenkins. They're not using DigitalOcean. Right? Like, just focus on your own context, and whatever pain you're feeling can probably be traced to one root cause. Maybe you're course correcting twice, 3 times per week. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you have 10 open branches for 5 developers. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe when you deploy, you immediately find the bug and then you need to deploy again. Maybe that's the problem. But try to figure out what the biggest pain point is, and if you don't know, if you're the leader and you don't know, just ask the team. Because they're the one feeling the pain. If you don't feel the pain as the leader, you're too far away from operations. Just ask the team. Ask whoever is doing operations. And sometimes the development team is not doing operations. I do have to mention that caveat. Sometimes operations is done by some QA or some DevOps team that is sort of isolated from engineering. Just ask them what the pain is and address it. Just know who to ask, who has the most natural, organic signal to pain. and let them guide you to the biggest problem. And then when that pain goes away, somebody else will be the loudest. Just follow that path. And just keep doing that. If you do that every week, you'll make 50 small improvements over the year, and you will skyrocket your team, regardless of how bad things are right now. Even if you're in a business that's maybe going bankrupt, or if you're in a business that's growing so fast that you're overwhelmed and you have no idea what to do, just focus on the biggest pain first. Never mind the old branches. Never mind what you promised in the roadmap. What is the biggest pain point this week? And take it seriously. And decide to do something about it. Don't talk about it. Do something about it. Do not discuss anything you're not prepared to take action on. I think that's one of the most important things. That also goes well in hand with estimates and roadmap plannings and making plans and designs and specs and architecture diagrams. Like, don't plan anything that you're not prepared to commit to. If you're prepared to commit to 1 week or a 2-week sprint, plan just that. This is classic lean, classic extreme programming. Commit as late as possible. Defer commitment, because you have no idea what you're doing. And if you have issues in your process, you'll need to devote time into fixing at least some big pain point. Focus on that. Conserve your energy. There's no energy left if you're overwhelmed. And whatever you're trying to improve, it will be painful. It will suck before it gets better. That's normal, because you're learning. The learning part causes frustration. It's a healthy kind of frustration. It's a struggle that you don't want. The struggle caused by not dealing with the pain. That's what you want to avoid. But it's really important to separate those two negative sides. One negative side leads to growth. One negative side leads to apathy, essentially. Right? You want to make sure, you want to be very honest with yourself on which side you're on week to week.
Great ending speech.
That's my public service announcement for everybody's well-being. As Adrian said, progress leads to happiness. Right? So if you're anxious about deployments, if your managers want certainty, it's time to improve engineering culture. Maybe you need TBD, maybe you don't. Maybe your pull requests take too long. Maybe you don't need them. Or maybe you need to pair more with your team because you have no idea what's going on and what pains they're experiencing.
Mm-hmm. And fight the resistance to change. So actually, many people know that it probably is the best way, but we don't want to have this struggle on the way to that outcome, and this is an indication that is the right way, because we as humans, we have a resistance baked into our minds, so we can't get rid of that. It's there every day, so for everyone. But it's like a compass, This is Stephen Pressfield. This is a book author of The War of Art. This book there, it's a very great book. So he says that it's basically resistance is pointing to north, completely secure. So you can be sure that this is north. This is the way you need to go in order to get to the goal. And north is resistance. So if you feel resistance for TBD, then most likely it is the way you should go towards to. You should go into direction. You should overcome the resistance and try things out. Maybe you fail on the point. Maybe you come to the conclusion that it's not for you. It's possible, but then you have clarity about that. If you have never tried it, you will never know. And this is how I face those things, and it's my compass actually, and it led me, in my opinion, to a better world for me, for my team, for my organization than the years before. And this is what I can maybe here contribute to that.
I like that. The compass. Trust your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And on the life coaching courses that I do, I often get asked, when I say trust your intuition, trust your gut, they tell me, well, how do I know, Dennis, that it's my gut, it's my intuition, and not my ego trying to talk me out of it? And it's a great question. And I always tell them, just if it's really your intuition, it will feel wrong to ignore it. So if you have an intuition of what's wrong and what needs to be addressed in your team, and you're sort of uncomfortable talking about it, figure out how to talk about it. Never mind how to address it. Just figure out how to talk about it. Maybe you don't have psychological safety in your team. Figure that out. Figure out who you're feeling safe talking to. Which manager, which peer, which report. Just make a step in one direction. Your post did go live, Adrian. I dropped the link in chat, so please. For those of you in our audience who don't know, Adrian has very successfully launched a very active newsletter recently called the Snackable CTO. So if you haven't connected the dots, that's Adrian, and I'm running the newsletter Crafting Tech Teams. If you haven't already, I know most of you already are subscribed, so I don't have to tell you, but of those of you who aren't, if you'd like to subscribe, keep in touch. There are archives and transcripts and videos of all of this also there, and also on LinkedIn and also on YouTube. Yes, you will ask me later. And with that, I would really like to thank you, Adrian, for, first of all, making all this effort, making all this research, taking the time to show up here today. I know there goes a lot of detail goes into this work behind the scenes that a lot of us don't see behind backstage. I would like to thank our audience, especially the awesome live chat participation. Like that's one of the reasons why we do this live and not recorded, because it's just the chat just guides the conversation. Like it makes our lives so much easier, and it makes me feel like we're being a lot more valuable to her with what we want to do. Like whenever I have a question in chat, like it just emphasizes the definition of done for whatever it is we're talking about.
And
So,
don't be shy. So just if you have questions and you feel they're maybe not ideal questions or even stupid questions, they are not stupid questions. So they are just a reason to discuss things, and you will learn, and the people who answer will learn as well. So it's all about learning. It's all about sharing experience and getting better and avoiding pain and all this kind of stuff. So if you have anything, feel free to ask. You are very, very invited to do so.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us live. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Balázs, for suggesting the topic. If you have any other topic suggestions, not just you, Balázs, anybody in the audience, and the topic of engineering culture, we're sort of figuring out where to go next and how to continue this with Adrian. We'll definitely stay in touch, and this is not the last time you've seen us. So with that, we're going to continue next week. Announcement on Monday, recaps on Tuesday. Thank you so much. Adrian, you as well.
Thank you. And goodbye.
Have a good one, and goodbye. I'm going to sign you off with some lovely elevator music that you know also well. And if you want, mingle a little bit in chat, say hello to each other, connect on LinkedIn with each other. Those of you who have conversed in chat.
And see you next time.
And we'll see you next time. Yes. Ciao.
Bye-bye.